Well, welcome to 7 Under Club Interactive. Saeed Abedini made headlines around the world when he was sentenced to 8 years in one of the worst prisons in Iran, all because of his Christian faith.
Here in America, his wife has also been suffering, along with their 2 children. Wendy Griffith sat with her for an intimate interview about her love for her husband and her ongoing fight for his freedom.
Their love story began in Iran. Naghmeh, an American citizen since early childhood, believed God was leading her to return to her homeland in 2001 to minister to Muslim women. That's where she first saw Saeed Abedini. The young preacher was leading worship at one of the underground house churches he helped form. What made you fall in love with him?
His passion. I think as a young woman, I always prayed. I said, Lord, I can't marry someone who's mediocre. I want to marry someone who is passionate for you. But I had no idea how he would answer my prayer. I had no idea it would be so radical.
Not long afterwards, the 2 married in Iran. Their wedding drew hundreds of well-wishers and aroused the suspicion of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard.
Well, our wedding, our union was a miracle because we were both Muslim converts and they allowed us to have a Christian union. Bibles were passed out, Jesus film videos were passed out, and many people came to know Christ, hundreds.
Well, it takes a special bride to be able to be willing to share her big day.
Jesus shined, which made me happy. Yes, I mean, you imagine that day it's going to be all about you, and it wasn't. It was just a big, I mean, it was amazing. It was what we both would have wanted for a wedding.
But 9 years and 2 children later, 4-year-old Jacob and 6-year-old Rebecca, Naghmeh is now living her worst nightmare. Last July, during one of Saeed's routine trips to Iran to establish a government-approved orphanage, he was detained and put under house arrest. Then, in January, the Iranian Revolutionary Court's so-called hanging judge sentenced him to 8 years in Iran's brutal and deadly Evin prison. His crime? Preaching the gospel. In these photos, you can see men hanging outside the prison, an attempt to bring even more terror to inmates and family members.
Just the name really scared me. I've had, during the revolution, people who we knew and also family members who were hanged in that prison and killed and abused and raped.
Before he was sentenced, Saeed could Skype with his family. Now they have no personal contact, only reports and letters from family members in Iran. The latest telling them that Saeed is being tortured and pressured to renounce his Christian faith.
I said to myself, they don't know who they're dealing with. Saeed came from a very radical Muslim background, and he's very, since he accepted Christ and his life changed, he was very committed. Doesn't matter what beatings he goes through. It doesn't matter if they say we're going to kill you.
As a wife, what's been the hardest part of all of this for you?
The Lord has given me grace to go to his presence and just get my comfort. But as a mom, it's just every time is this like a stab in my heart when I see them struggling and I can't do anything about it. My son is his character has changed 100%. Since the arrest, he won't talk as much. He's very reserved. And then my daughter, she just cries a lot.
What does it say?
It says, I miss you, Dad.
And these are your tears?
Yeah.
Naghmeh admits at first she sank into despair.
I was in the edge of extreme depression and anxiety and worry. And I could see that where I was almost being broken, I would have had to check myself in, but the Lord didn't let me break. I clung to him and I cried out to him. I said, Lord, in Philippians, you promised you will give peace beyond understanding. And he gave me that peace. And so the scripture is true. I just want people to know that if they cling to him and believe in his scripture and just don't let him go, hold on tight, he's gonna get you through whatever it is.
Secretary of State John Kerry promised to work for Saeed's freedom and says he's disturbed by Abedini's prison sentence. Still, Naghmeh believes prayer, not government, will free her husband.
Do you believe you'll see him again?
I do, it's the flesh versus the spirit. My flesh wants to say he's not going to survive that prison. But when I pray, I feel like the Lord, he's a God of hope. And he tells me that it's at his time he will release Saeed.
Well, for more, joining us via Skype is Naghmeh. Naghmeh, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Enjoy being with you. Thank you.
You recently got a letter from your husband. It's only the third one he's been allowed to send in nearly 6 months. What did he tell you?
He's talking about, gives me a glimpse into what he's dealing with in the prison and the beating he had endured, and his parents not being able to recognize him and crying out when they saw him. And he talks about forgiveness for those who are not treating him well, and he talks about joy. That is his strength. He's finding joy in forgiveness and in being a witness for Christ in that prison.
I just find it incredible he's finding joy in the middle of being beaten. How are you dealing with that kind of information?
It's hard and at the same time encouraging. It's hard to hear him suffering. I want to do everything I can to get him out and get him treated and have him survive. But it's encouraging that he's getting so much from the Lord, that he's growing, and that the Lord is just giving him so much grace. I mean, to have joy and forgiveness it's supernatural. It has to only come from God, and I'm happy that he's receiving. It's because of all these prayers. He's receiving, just the presence of God and just learning how to forgive and have joy in such circumstances.
What are you telling your children? Are you letting them know how severe this is?
No, they know about the 8-year sentence, and that's it. They don't know that he's had beatings. They don't know he's had bleeding. They just, they still don't know they don't know what the 8-year sentence is. Actually, they don't know about the 8-year sentence either, but they know he's in prison, and they really think he's going to come home any day. Jacob was expecting him to come for his birthday, and he didn't. Easter, Jacob woke up and said, "Mommy, is Daddy coming here 1,100 days from now?" And he was kind of frustrated. And I said, "No, but I don't know when he's going to come home. We just have to pray and trust Jesus." And my daughter, the night before Easter, was just crying. Easter was such a big celebration for our family, and Saeed just would do a cross with them, would explain the whole Easter process since they were toddlers. He would just continually explain. We'd have a craft, and he would explain about what Jesus did on the cross and forgiveness and all of that. So it was just strange not having him around.
In a recent blog posting, you've been leaning on a passage from the Bible, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 8 to 9, which says, "We're persecuted but not forsaken, struck down but not destroyed." Are you really finding the strength to see this through at this point in time?
I am. It's actually interesting when you go through horrific situations like this or trials, you realize how weak you are, how in any second you could be in a state of despair, and just in your flesh, your body, your emotions, your mind, your spirit is so weak. But at the same time, when you cry out to God and you reach out to him, you realize how strong he is. You might be persecuted. You might go through this life with persecution and hardships, but you're never broken. You can always have joy and peace that's beyond understanding because you're connected to God and you're connected to Jesus, and he's the source of peace and strength. And so that's been my prayer, is that as his people, we can embrace those sufferings and really allow it to draw us close to God and to discover how amazing he is. Every day I have to do this. Every day I have to go to his presence and ask him to help me survive, another day. It's despair and discouragement. Easter was very hard. It's at my door, and it comes to me, and you will never see your husband, and I have to just continually go to the Lord and receive his peace and strength to be able to be a single mom.
It's a great mystery, but there's something to the whole fellowship of suffering and identification with Jesus. I knew a pastor who had been imprisoned in Saudi Arabia. He was beaten for his faith. His crime was receiving a Bible in the mail. And he told me that he actually didn't mind being in prison because in the middle of all of that, he never felt closer to Jesus. And that there was such joy and peace in his presence, he was able to withstand and endure everything that was happening to him. So it's hard for people who haven't gone through it to really understand it, but yeah, you can find the peace that passes all understanding. We've posted your story on our Facebook page. People everywhere say they're praying for you and your family. How can we pray for you?
The Lord won't allow me. Still last night, the night before Easter, I was praying for Saeed's release, and the Lord kept saying, do you want him released now, or do you want my will to be done? So he's still, every time I pray, is seek ye first my kingdom and my will. And so prayer for God's timing on his release, appointed time for Saeed to be released, but his health, I do get worried about how he's doing his bleeding, and just that my kids, the kids and I, especially the kids, it's harder for them to understand that the Lord would just give us continuous grace and strength to continue and to be a witness to how good he is. If our short life that just passes by so quickly can be used to encourage others to come to know Christ or to go to him and taste him and see how good he is, then anything really is worth it. Losing our life, and anything in life is worth it if God is counting us worthy for that. So prayer for continued strength and grace for our family, for me and the kids and I, and also Saeed in that prison.
Well, here's a prayer that just came to my mind. I'll pray that angels will come and strengthen you, your children, and your husband, just as angels came to strengthen Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. I pray that angels will come and strengthen you in your hour of trial. Naghmeh, thank you for talking with us and being with us, and thank you for your incredible testimony of the peace that passes all understanding.
Thank you, and thank you for all your prayers. It gives us great encouragement and strength.
God bless you. Well, now we want to talk with Jordan Sekulow from the American Center for Law and Justice. He's been fighting on behalf of Pastor Saeed. Jordan, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Gordon.
Well, what's ACLJ doing to help Pastor Saeed?
Well, first it was about raising public awareness and when. We began working with this family back in July when Saeed was placed under house arrest. He was arrested by the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard, and for 2 months he was not sure exactly what would be happening to him, but we were able to plan on, well, if you are put into prison, if you are charged, and if you are convicted, and communication becomes tougher, kind of like what Naghmeh was talking about. At first, the kids could see him and talk on Skype and use that. The family is also facing severe persecution, Saeed's family in Iran. So we were planning, and then about a week before Christmas, it became very clear Saeed had now been in prison then since September, that we would have to go public, and we had to go public now, that a conviction was coming, that his health was not good, that the beatings, the brutality in these interrogations had gone so far that he wasn't going to be let out anytime soon. In fact, Saeed said that right before he went into prison, that he doesn't think this will be over quickly. And so we went public, and we wanted to make sure that the U.S. government first was going to do everything it could for this American citizen. We say Saeed Abedini over and over, and you can forget that this is an American citizen with an American family, as you were just talking to his American wife and his American children, who are wondering why he is in prison and when he'll get to come home. But these convictions of 8 years, Gordon, in a place like Evin Prison in Tehran is rough. Surviving that alone is a miracle.
What I just heard was he was beaten so badly that his parents no longer recognized him, and you hear that, and I'm wondering, where's the outrage here? Here's an American citizen in jail for being a Christian, and I think in just practically any other circumstance there would be such a sense of outrage coming, not just from Congress but from every branch of government, and not just the Secretary of State, but the President himself would be saying, you've got to release this American citizen and allow them to come back to America. Why aren't we seeing that?
Well, it took us months to engage the State Department, and I'm talking about daily public pressure, media pressure, Naghmeh going on television and saying, I need the Secretary of State, to the point where we had a congressional hearing where we had members of Congress, Republican and Democrat, call a hearing on Saeed's situation. Naghmeh comes in all the way from Idaho. The State Department sends no one, and this is in Washington, D.C., so they're about a mile down the road. She flies in. There's no one there from the State Department, but we still went to their offices, the State Department headquarters here in Washington, right after, all met with them because we need them. We need their support. As you were talking about, Gordon, we need the work that they can do. We can do a lot, but we can't do everything at the ACLJ without the government's support, and it took months, which is unfortunate. The European Union spoke out before the United States. At the United Nations. You had Australia speak out before the United States at the United Nations. Now, we were doing a lot of that work, but you would think that this was such an easy issue for everyone to see. But looking back now, as we work through this one, because he's an American and a convert to Christianity and not just a political prisoner, even though that's how he's being treated, as a threat. Understand, in Iran, he is treated as a national security threat to the regime, that it was that much harder for our government to wrap their heads around why he needed our help, and was he some kind of zealot? And I mean, these were the kind of questions we had to answer. Really unbelievable when you get down to it. It's an American. He's imprisoned in Iran. Whether he's a hiker or a Christian pastor, everyone should be speaking out for him. And I agree with you. It was very difficult and disturbing how long it took, though now we were trying to look forward, and I think you could tell with speaking to Naghmeh, she is too, that we have to just stay on what we do and work as hard as we can to get Saeed home.
Is there any hope of this issue getting in front of the United Nations in a stronger capacity? I mean, Iran signed the Declaration of Universal Human Rights, and one of those is the freedom of conscience, the ability to convert. Is there any hope there?
You've got the UN Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, their own constitution. Actually, this violates the way that this process, the charges themselves, going back to the UN issue, the charges themselves date back to the early 2000s. So Saeed has gone back and forth between Iran to work on this orphanage and has had no trouble. So, out of nowhere, as kind of a message, I think, to any Iranian Christian, it's, listen, you may not have charges pending against you right now, and we'll pick you up and throw you in jail for 8 years, but with your Revolutionary Guard. It scares other Christians. It scares other people who think that everything is going okay for them. I don't think Saeed would ever have done this. I mean, Naghmeh has been on these trips before. The kids have been on the trips before. They're Iranian, and yes, they're Americans, but they've got family there. This is something that they're a little bit more used to dealing with than you or I just going over to Iran. It's not that kind of situation. And yet, at the UN specifically, the dragging of the feet of our own government, the first time they had an opportunity to speak out for Saeed, they did not. And a lot of that is what spurred the congressional action. That was kind of an it for everybody. When our own UN ambassador to the United Nations Human Rights Council was silent when the European Union spoke out, that, when you had 27 member states of the EU endorsing a statement calling for Saeed Abedini's release, and nothing from his own government. It's as if the United States did not want to be too attached to this individual, to Saeed Abedini. And so there's a lot of work that's left to be done, but we're working, primarily now with the international community, at the United Nations, with other countries, because we know that from all this media attention and from the people around the world who have been speaking out for Saeed on their own, that Iran is already their ambassadors, their representatives to different foreign governments and countries, and also the UN. They are already looking at ways to get out of this. And the treatment has been a little bit better. Every time there's a little bit more news attention and media attention, Saeed is not getting beaten as badly. They've been promised, this is, I think, our next major step. Iran has promised Saeed medical attention following his first ever medical exam, which he did get a couple of weeks ago. He is yet to, as of this day, actually get that medical treatment from real doctors in a hospital. That's where the international community can really pressure, because they promised this, they allowed a medical review, they confirmed his internal bleeding. And I think, honestly, with all of Iran's issues that they're dealing with, They don't need an American citizen dying on their watch because they wouldn't give him the proper medical care. We're not even talking about release yet. We're talking about basic medical care. So that's a pressure point that we're focusing on right now.
Well, Jordan, thanks for being with us, and thanks for fighting on behalf of Pastor Saeed and on behalf of Christians around the world.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gordon. Thanks for covering it, and thanks to CBN as well.